Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. This is Alex Luzadre coming at you with Ben Gothard. Let's see, a good friend of mine who I met through the Sub2 community. And today, as I'm starting this journey onto YouTube, you guys have landed on my YouTube channel. And I appreciate you guys being here very much. And I thought that it might be important that you guys have some frame of reference for who I am, where I'm coming from, so that the information that I'm giving you has some context, has some more depth to it, and also that I can just be transparent and add value along my journey, right? So you guys can see where I've come, which helps to put in reference, like to reframe where I'm going in that sort of sense. Ben, give some context for Ben here. He's been doing podcasts for the better part of a decade, over 500 interviews, Ben,
That's right. Hmm.
with some really high level people, which I'm not sure if I'm worthy of his his talents here to be on that list, but I appreciate him nonetheless taking the time today to interview me in an effort to again kind of make this more transparent for you guys. Um, so with that, Ben, is there anything I left out there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. I think an origin story is always like one of the most important pieces of content on any channel. It gives you the insight into who this individual is. And now everybody can see that no matter where you're starting from, no matter where you're coming from, or what your goals are, there are always going to be people who have made it and gone through that journey and are sharing things transparently like you are. And that to me is very inspiring, and people can learn a lot from that. And it's really just an example of somebody started from here and now they're over there, and that story of how they got there is always important to know in my perspective. I've interviewed billionaires, New York Times bestselling authors, Emmy Award winners, serial entrepreneurs, professors, you name it. I've talked to so many of them. That includes, for the real estate folks out there, Grant Cardone. Actually flew out to his studio in Miami to got a chance to sit with them. Patrick Bet David, Kim Garst, Pat Flynn, just some amazing people. I'm so very lucky to have been able to sit with them. So when you invited me on today, I was like, wow, thank you so much for the invite here. So glad we get to dive into it. And so very happy to be here at the beginning of this amazing journey of your channel and your content creation phase of your career.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Ben. Man, those are some big names, dude. Again, not sure. It's an honor to now have my name coincide with them as the list of people that you've interviewed.
Well, you're an absolute legend, and I'm sure that very soon in your content creation journey, you'll be collabing with them and doing stuff with them. Anyway, so I
That'd
think
be
it's going
cool.
to be exciting. Okay, so I'm putting on my interviewer hat on, and let's dive in. So,
Do it.
I think one of the most important things to talk about here is you. We're diving into your origin story. So, what I really want to know is, what is your story?
Man, that's a let's see here. We could start where I was born in Maine. My mother and father, um, very resourceful people. My dad built the house that we lived in up in Maine. It was a carpenter by trade, and soon realized that there's not a whole lot for kids growing up in Maine to grow up and do. So by the time I was 4 years old, relocated down to Charlotte, North Carolina. Grew up, went to school there. We stayed in the same house. Growing up, my dad was extremely frugal. It didn't know that we had money, and honestly, like yeah, I don't think he was not a wealthy man by any means, but definitely pinched his pennies well enough to where we never had to go without. Right, very grateful for how hard he worked, and I certainly learned the value of a hard day's work from my dad. Going to work with him, installing kitchens, building things, working even on his days off. He'd be working around the house, from dusk till dawn. The guy never sat down. So that's certainly where I get a lot of my work ethic from. So then, fast forward, I was in college, went to University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And man, I was not on the collegiate path. Let's put it that way. I was, um, it just wasn't for me, and it took me a couple of years to really realize that. Like I went through my first couple of years doing just fine. Um, Dean's List the first year, all this. But then by the third year, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to major in. The strengths that I had were, in English, and I just didn't have a pull to really pursue that. And so fast forward, I had done an internship where I was selling books door to door for a couple of years during the summertime, which really, man, it got me out of my shell. I was a very introverted person at that time, very self-conscious. So that gave me a ton of self-confidence. Found out I was great at sales, loved being in front of people, and helping them, through what I had to offer, what I was selling. So I did that for a couple of years. I then started selling supplement insurance door to
Now
door.
I want to jump in for a second.
Sure.
Before we get to the insurance, I want to double click on this first experience in sales, right? I feel like in every entrepreneur's journey, in every successful person's journey, there is that rocky moment where they're doing the training behind the scenes, they're spending the time, they're grinding it out, they're figuring it out. And you literally went door to door and went from, it seems like, being self-conscious and not really knowing sales to, okay, well, now you're being thrust into this situation where you're forced to perform and you're learning and you're on the hook, right? So what was that like? How did you go from that point to where you didn't know anything about sales to where it seems like you were, you kind of cut through and learned it and figured it out and developed the self-confidence? What did that journey look like? What was that transformation like?
Man, it was terrifying. To sum it up, it was terrifying. No, the company was called Southwestern, still is. They were one of the oldest companies, if not the oldest, like internship in America. Like dates back to like 150 plus years ago, where they were selling Bibles door to door. Now it's more educational materials and things of that nature. But they had a great like sales training week. Like so to kick the summer off, there was like a sales training. Everybody goes in, you learn your script. It's busy day in, day out to kind of emulate what you're going to be doing the rest of the summer. And so I was plucked out of Matthews, Indian Trail, North Carolina, 1 week of sales training in Nashville, Tennessee, and then drove on out in a caravan to Missouri. And I was living with a host mom in this little town called Potosi, Missouri. I will never forget this place. Like one of the first things I did was like, I've got my laptop, like I need to connect to the internet, and she's like, what internet? What? I pull up to a gas station, and I'm like, hey, where's the nearest Wi-Fi hotspot? And they're like, the what-fi? What are you talking about? Like, bro, it was Potosi is a special town. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that was my first realization that not everywhere in America has internet. So yeah,
Right.
that was definitely threw me off. And it honestly was the best thing ever, because it really cut off this addiction that I had to being online, gaming, and all this stuff. It just completely threw that out the window, and I didn't know how much I actually needed to sever those ties, right? So then I went through my training, and they teach you like, hey, this is how you set up your day. This is what your schedule is looking like, right? You need to cut up the day into these little chunks of time, and you have your they call it goal periods, right? So if you want to talk to 30 families within a day, you can break up the day into 10 goal periods, and you need to talk to 3 within those periods, right? And so it was literally just living, go have some breakfast, go straight out to my territory, map it out. Here's draw a little map of the area that I was working on, and okay, like here's a house, and I've talked to this person, they didn't have any kids, and I need to go find families and sit down and show them what I got. So that was, dawn to dusk, probably 12 hours a day, Monday through Saturday, and then we'd get together on Sundays and have a meeting and like share our experiences, what's going well, what's not going well, try to help everybody out, and then rinse repeat throughout the entire summer. So,
now, did you have a script that you were working from? Did
yes.
you create that? Okay, so
Oh,
you
heck
had
no.
the script.
Yeah, yeah. That was part of the sales training was, hey, learn the script, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just get in, sit down in front of parents, go through the script, and here's your answers to objections, here's the whole 9 yards. So it was really like the best sales 101 that I could possibly have. And again, applying those principles from my dad of like, hey man, like you're going to work, right? Like go out there, blinders on, and then just get after it. And I came out the gates really strong. I was like one of the leading like first year salespeople throughout those first couple weeks. And then I had some territory issues where I had to move around, got off schedule, which I didn't really know what that was. Apparently there's a lot of people go out there and just didn't do the work, right? And I didn't even know that was a thing you could do until later on when I myself got off schedule and started to the summer wasn't going in as good of a direction as it had started as a result of that, right? So definitely took some lessons from that. Came back the next year, and again, school that was in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, and then I went back and did it a second year. Learned a lot more doing it as a returning student, having been through a good and a bad schedule. Right, the second year, I just wanted to prove to myself that I could maintain a good schedule all throughout the summer, and I did just that. Landed in like the top 10% of like returning students, and from there, I was kind of burned out on it. And
Before we go to the next part of this,
sure.
what were some of the key learnings that you took away from that would be valuable to other people as far as these foundational sales skills, these foundational nuggets of what makes a salesperson effective? What made you effective out there? What really worked?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think the number one thing, or a couple things that I could take away from, in no particular order of importance, was finding the need, right? Like I wouldn't, in selling educational books to kids, I was wasting a lot of time talking to grandparents, right? So they're just not my audience, right? So like finding the people that I could actually help, right? If like for example, if there was two families with high schoolers, one who's like super ready to go to college, trying to do everything that they can in order to do that, I got something that could help them. Versus if they're on a different path and like, hey, college just isn't for me, or they're not just totally out of school, not even into it, I might be able to get away with selling them something, but are they really going to use it? Or are these just really expensive paperweights? You know what I mean? So that would be the biggest takeaway. And I find that throughout the rest of my sales career up to this date, identifying the people that I can truly help, right? And that makes all the difference, to where it becomes less of like an arm wrestling match, like I'm going to sell you something, and more of like, hey, here's a need, you've got a problem, I can solve it via XYZ, and we can, both benefit on the other side of that, right? I think that's huge. The second thing was the power of just being consistent, right? Like sticking to a schedule, not deviating away from the things that I knew I needed to be doing in order to move the needle, right? Being active in my day and not reactive in my day. I think those things were yeah. I think those two things combined were the biggest takeaways that I got from my time out there doing that.
I love that. I'm going to ask you that same question in each of your experiences with sales. and we'll see if those same tenets of find the need and consistency, we'll see if those continue on, and if those have held up throughout the years, because I think that'll be a really interesting historical arc to see throughout your career. Okay, so you started to mention selling insurance after this first real experience with sales, where you really learned a lot. Seems like you developed a lot as a person. Talk to us about that. What's the next step in your timeline?
Man, so yeah, I started to sell insurance. It was like supplemental, so like cancer, heart attack, stroke, stuff like that. Um, and I was still, I was still young. I was still, maybe 21, 22. No, I was probably 20, 21 years old at this time. And it's this topic, while this product was very beneficial, it helps a lot of people. It's such a heavy topic for me. I probably just wasn't mature enough or ready for that. So that was a briefer stint into that sales career. I was started off in North Carolina, and then it was during that time I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona. Um, and that alone was a major shift, going door to door on the East Coast, where, Southern hospitality is very much alive. Come on in, what do you got? For the most part, to Phoenix, where it's, very hot. They got these crazy security doors, right, where they can open their door and there's still this big metal door that's I can't even see who I'm talking to. So like my usual MO of like shaking the guy's hand, looking him in the eye, like it completely went out the window, threw me for a loop. And I soon realized that I don't think this is my path. I
Right.
could have dug my heels in. I'm honestly glad I didn't, because this is another transition in my life where I kind of took a step back. Um, I had been pushed towards a lot of responsibility throughout my life, whether it being in school or, like, hey, you're doing really good at this sales stuff. You should continue on going and do that. I kind of wanted to take some time and do what I wanted to do. And I've always been into fitness. Growing up as like the skinny kid, I always had, something of a chip on my shoulder, something to prove. So I diverted my attention towards that and started working with a gym. And it was around this
Now,
time.
before we get into that, I know I keep stopping you, but there's just these nuggets of golden wisdom here that I really want to make sure we tap into. So this sales experience, it seemed like, was very different from the other one. It seems like whereas you really loved that first one and you took a lot from it and establishing the foundation, I think one of the things you may have learned here, and I'm kind of fishing here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you learned what is and is not a good fit for you as far as a product that you're selling. And you probably learned a lot about yourself as far as like, well, what do I actually want to sell? And what's important to me as far as the product and understanding location. So maybe we can dig into that and some of those lessons you took from there. Maybe not on as much of the positive side of like, this is how to sell better, the consistency and
Sure.
finding the need, but maybe on like the negatives of more so of like what to avoid in your own career and learning more about yourself there, because that's equally as important.
Again, I think my biggest takeaways from that is that I just wasn't ready for that level of a sale, or like that kind of emotional tie-in. I was still pretty immature, to a high degree. So I don't, yeah, again, I don't think it was a bad product. And it's something that now I could see myself going back to. I still have an insurance license and can still sell those products, but I think the biggest factor that I kind of had to dig my heels on was the door-to-door, direct-to-consumer type model. Like I was just burned out on it. When you wake up and you've got a knot in your stomach, feeling like you're gonna puke because you gotta go, do this door-to-door gig again. I'm like, man, like hats off to everybody doing it, whether it's solar or anything door to door. It is not easy, and I have the utmost respect for it. I just had in my mind, I think I had pushed that as far as I was willing to go with it, right? And so it could have been any product, and I was just done going down that path.
Right.
And so recognizing that and pivoting towards something that I had a pull towards, right? It was like trying to figure out, man, I'm out of college. I've gone down this path of sales and I'm good at that. Like, what else could I go do? And could I marry, what I'm good at with something that I'm passionate about, right?
And so that starts the fitness journey.
The fitness journey, which super fun. I got a job at a gym, and this is funny because it really also started my path in finance, unbeknownst to me, right? So some little key takeaways here. So I started working at a 24-hour fitness out here doing membership sales, and I loved it, but I wasn't having like the impact that I wanted. It was still very salesy, and I saw the personal trainers running around, putting people through workouts and helping them and having a more direct impact. And I was like, I like that. I want to go do something in that regard. So and this was a very short stint, maybe a couple of months doing membership sales, right? The other key takeaway was that, here I am, I'm working a 40-hour a week job doing membership sales, and there's some commissions in there as well. And I was just making enough money to pay my rent, pay for my car payment, and basically subsist, right? Like food, all the other things there. And I'm like, my car payment is essentially like I started biking to work because I was like, I'm going to work in order to pay for a car that I need in order to go to work. Like, this is
Doesn't make sense.
this doesn't make any sense. Like, let me just eliminate a whole bunch of stuff that I don't need, and I can actually have a surplus, start paying down the student loans, which I didn't have much to begin with, but they were enough. And that was another like key moment that kind of awakened something in like the finance mind for me, where I remember making my first payment on my student loans because I was out of college, and I look at the balance and I'm like, that's weird. The balance is bigger than when it started a month ago. What's going on here? And so there again, between the car and then realizing like I need to make more than just the minimum payment on these, or else like this is going to get out of hand real quick. Like, what did I sign up for? Right. So what happened after that? I went to a different gym to sell membership sales, and they had like a long training program. And for I can't remember the circumstances around this, but I didn't get passed on to actually go do membership sales. And they were like, you can either go do you can be a janitor or something for a little while until the next like training round is up. And I was like, I'm out. So it was at that point I started bartending, kind of working in more of like the nightclub scene around Phoenix. And then at the same time, I was working out in my own regard and taking on like clients one by one and doing some like off grid, so to speak. Like, I didn't have a license to be training people, but I at one point had asked a trainer at one of the gyms I was going to, like, is there value in me getting a certification? And he was like, honestly, dude, like, a lot more than some of these trainers out here, and you have more like direct experience that people, you're a walking billboard at that point. Like, there's nothing wrong with you training people outside of this and like giving them programs, giving them diet plans that they can go execute on, and without you needing to be there one-on-one. So that was a couple years of my life going down that path, which was really fun. I know you might ask me what some key takeaways from that are.
You betcha.
So that one in particular was that, while I have a passion for fitness, always have, always will. It still is a big part of my life. You and I have had some pretty awesome conversations about that. I don't always think that following or working within your passion is optimal. right? Like one of my favorite quotes is that if you want to ruin your passion, go to work within your passion. Like it soon becomes a job, and like anything that's it's work related, like it's a tedious, repetitive task that you're not always going to be passionate about, right? So to me, like I find more passion in like if somebody needs some help, if somebody needs some motivation, I'm there, right? But like as far as like being there every day to like guide you through your workout, that's not my job. That's not my path. Um, so then it was at this time that I had met my wife. We were my now wife. We were dating, and I remember this moment. We had gotten a puppy, Great Dane, we named Duke, and I remember leaving one night to go work at the bars, and um, I had this like something clicked in my head where I was like, I can't keep doing this if I want a family,
Mm,
right? Or
wow.
at least not in the capacity that I would want to have a family. There's plenty of people that, work in bars and, make a great living to support their family. There's nothing wrong with that, but it felt disjointed for me.
Hmm.
And I literally turned around, called up the bar, was like, "Hey, I'm not coming in. I'm done." And it was at that point I was like, I'm either gonna make it with this fitness thing or something else. Something else something's got to give, and I had to let go of that in order to. I knew I had to let go of that in order to progress.
What an inflection point.
That was a massive turning point. Like
How did you come to, did it just hit you one day?
literally, I was on the drive there. Like I felt
Wow.
like this tug at my heart, and I was like, I'm leaving my girlfriend at the time, my pup at home, and to me that was my future, right? And I was
Hmm.
going to go, work at the bars where, I'm around a bunch of drinking, a bunch of stuff, and it just wasn't. I knew it wasn't going to be conducive to where I wanted to go. So, it took a while for me to get there. I was in that scene and had some fun and for a long time. But at this point, I was around 25, I want to say. And so I was like, I need to start turning this around. And I had seen guys that I had worked with at the bars that, looked younger, looked youthful, and then come to find out they're in their 40s. And I'm like, oh, man, like I'm gonna blink and I'm gonna be there too. And again, nothing wrong with being in bars, but I knew that that was not where I wanted to be at that point. So I dug my heels into the personal training thing and was trying to get that off the ground, make a little bit more money doing that in order to pay the bills. And this is hilarious. So I had a workout partner for my within for my own personal workouts, and I was talking to him one day. I was like, man, I'm really interested in buying a house. Kind of going down this path of starting a family. And he goes, that's what I do, right? Like I help people get the financing that they need in order to buy houses. Like I'm a mortgage banker. And I was like, what? Like that's a thing? Like what is that? So yeah, he sits down with me after we work out and he's like, man, I think you'd actually be really good at this. Like you should check this out. Like I'll help you get licensed. And I was like, well, I don't really want to invest the time and the money in doing that if I don't know that I have a job. Met with his broker owner at the time, who was like, you get your license, I'll hire you the next day. Cool. So
Okay, time out for a second.
yeah,
You were pre-selling and pre-locking in your income. You're pre-selling yourself to the into this position. That is brilliant. That is risk mitigation at an extremely brilliant level. I
I'm
just
a
wanted to
very
point that
risk
out there.
averse person. I don't I don't like well now I should say I'm a very risk averse person, and when it's come to finances I've always been erring on the side of caution. So that was yeah, I was like, that's a lot of work, that's a lot of it's now looking back, it's funny because it's really not a lot of money, but it was enough. And I didn't have much at the time to where I was like, if I'm going to make this investment, I need to know that I've got a path moving forward. So literally, I think, what was it? I went from not knowing what equity was, had no idea. Like I'd heard the term, just didn't ever dial in on it at the time. And also I was pretty far removed. Like I was a great student. I always had like straight A's in high school, dean's list in my first year of college, and then obviously it trailed off a little bit. But for the last like 4 years thereafter, I was like a knuckle dragging, weightlifting personal trainer, right? So like hadn't touched the book, hadn't like, used that part of my brain for a long time. So we would like work out, and then God bless this guy, he's still like I owe him a debt that I cannot repay to him, because he, for an hour after every workout, would sit down with me. We'd go through like the training manuals, the study materials. He'd ask me questions, and we'd go back and forth. This is like the mortgage test is designed to make you fail, which if you're fresh out of college, you have the tools, you're equipped to get that done, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was not, and so, but like I missed passing the test by one question my first time.
Oh,
I
brutal.
was devastated. You had to wait a month in order to take it again. So I studied up. I did not take it as seriously. I didn't study up as hard as I should have. I actually failed it worse the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Waited another month, and now if you fail it 3 times, you got to wait. I think it's 6 months before you can take it for a fourth. So I was like, do or die, got to do this. And I
Crunch
really,
time.
really buckled down and studied my butt off and passed it the third time. So this is 3 months later. In this time frame, my buddy had left the brokerage that he was at to go work for a retail bank or lender, Loan Depot. And he was like, bro, they're not taking newbies right now. Like, go hang your hat at some brokerage, get a loan done, and I'll be able to get you in a couple months. Okay. It's exactly what I did. And so I think that was probably October of, I want to say 2015. No, 2014, when I got my license. And then it was March of like February, I funded my first loan, and then March of 2015, I started at Loan Depot. So it was just boom, 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 boom. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons I transitioned to Loan Depot, the brokerage that I started at is a great local brokerage. They're one of the best in the state by far for like purchases, and if you want to go and build your own business outside of their or inside of their brokerage, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I had no experience, didn't know what I didn't know. And, I had asked the guy that was helping me, like, what are some good, like, first year expectations that I should set for myself? What are some goals? He was like, well, if you did like 8 loans this first year, that'd be a great first year. And I'm doing the math in my head, and like, no, like I need to do way more than that, like to hit the goals that I wanted to hit. I wanted to, make 6 figures in my first year, like, which is a pretty lofty goal and you don't know anything. And I didn't feel like I was going to get the support and training that I've needed in order to be successful. And so joining Loan Depot, within that first year, I think I did over 6 figures within the first year. I was there for a second year. And mind you, like one of the biggest things that I wanted to get out of Loan Depot and get away from the brokerage was that, 8 loans in a year, I'm only experiencing and getting exposure to 8 different situations, right? There's a lot of nuance in loans. So going into Loan Depot, I was doing 100 to 150 loans a year. So it was just way more exposure, way more experience, at the trade-off of, I wasn't making per loan what I would have made if I was doing that same kind of volume at the brokerage, but I got the experience.
And I want to take a second to reflect on that for a moment, because what you just hit on is probably one of the more undervalued ideas that I don't think people really realize. Our knowledge compounds just like money can.
1,000%.
And the fact that you went in and you're like, I just want to get the reps, because you're getting the sales experience, you're getting the loan experience, you're building connections with people that are in the space, you're developing a reputation, and you're just in the game, and you're taking so many more at bats, and that doing that volume of things, that in and of itself is a skill, because you're kind of having to project manage multiple deals at the same time. Even though you may not make as much money on a per deal basis, at that point in a career, the money doesn't matter. You're not going to become a trillionaire by doing that one particular thing, but the knowledge that you're gaining and the compounded learnings from all of that, the habits you're developing, the belief in yourself that you're developing, the skill set, the knowledge, and you're getting paid for all that stuff. And, doing six figures in your first year of any position, I mean, that's amazing, especially given the fact that you were brand new to this whole game. I mean, that was a game changer on multiple levels. It seems like the most valuable part of that seems to be this knowledge, experience, self-confidence, and all of that compounding at the same time. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I feel like that's really undervalued in the marketplace right now. Everybody's trying to think of how they can make a dollar now instead of how they can compound their knowledge to make many, many, many more dollars a little bit later on down the road.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I think it's tricky, because depending on where you live, depending on what your lifestyle is, right, which is another topic we could touch on, but people want to race to that finish line, right? Thinking like, as soon as I make X amount of dollars a year, I've made it, I'm good, all these problems will go away. And while that's true to some extent, like your financial problems, the problems that can be solved with money are solved with money, right? But there's a whole host of other problems that money does not solve, right? And if you've lived enough life, like if you haven't lived enough life to experience that, like you'll get there. Like money doesn't make your family want to stay around you. It doesn't buy time back with your kids, unless you're, of course, like paying someone to take tasks off of your plate to free up your time, to which then you can spend however you want, right, with your family and whatnot. But I would say 100%, man. Like in the game of real estate, there's like probably 5 ways that you can start to make money with or without a real estate license, or going a broker route if you want to be an investor. And I think if you had no experience, yes, you can dive into hours of podcasts, which is what I did. I spent, 3 years or so listening to podcasts, taking notes, reading blog posts, and just trying to figure out what direction I wanted to move in. Again, my conservative nature, right? Like I didn't want to take a step forward and 2 steps back. I wanted to just take small steps, right? I'm not racing anybody else's race. This is just me and time, right? But I think that I would have had far better success had I applied that Loan Depot experience strategy to real estate investing, and just found an investor who is doing what I would want to be doing, and going and working for them, right? Giving them my time, them giving me experience.
That makes a ton of sense. And I also think one other thing that you've done brilliantly in your career, and it seems like thus far in the narrative, but then we've also talked outside of this, and it seems like you're still doing that same thing to this day, is finding a trusted person that has been there and done that, gotten to the place that you want to get to, and asking them and talking to them, and almost, and I don't know if you would frame it this way, but to me that's almost like a mentor type of relationship.
Absolutely.
And yeah. And so one of the things I wanted to ask there, because I feel like this is a fine line. Maybe it may not be, but at least I feel like in some people's minds, this will be a fine line. So I want to address it. When you're reaching out to a mentor, there's just almost this duality of, hey, I'm where I am and I want to get to where I want to get to, and you're where I want to be, and I'd love to learn from you. So you want to be honest with them about where you are so they can actually help you. But sometimes it can be, it might be a little embarrassing for somebody to say, this is where I am, or this is the experience that I have. And they may they may have a desire to almost posture a little bit when talking to the mentor. So, how did you approach the mentor in the sense of how did you communicate where you were trying to go, while still showing them the value that you can provide, with what you do have at the time so that they believe in you and they're willing to invest the time into you?
That's a great question. Are we wanted to highlight like the more recent mentorship, like in the multifamily, or like in various other areas where, like, well, I guess I could frame it with like Loan Depot, for example. I remember one of the final interviews, I'm sitting down with like the VP of sales, and he's like, why should I hire you? Like, you have no experience in this. You're coming from a completely different field, right? Like, why should I take you on? And I was like, I'm gonna outwork everybody here. Like, I've done sales before. It's nothing different here. Like, you guys have a script, give me the script and give me the leads, and I will outwork everybody until I'm at the place where I've got the experience, right? And so it was literally told him, like, I need you to take a shot on me. Like, you will not be disappointed. And sure enough, like, I was never like the number one sales guy there, but I was always in the top 30%, 25%, sometimes the top 20. Um, and I think a lot of that's because I had other things that I wanted to do in my life, whether it was my health, whether it was my relationship with my now wife. I valued those things over work, and there's always people at places like that that don't have that, and they show up at 6, they're out the door at 8, 9 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. It's like, I'm not going to beat that guy.
Right.
I'm not going to, like, I don't have a secret sauce, sales process to outwork the guy that's outworking me. You know what I mean?
Right.
But again, so bringing that back to the mentor mentee relationship, like, it's more for me, it's more of a question of humility in saying, like, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. Um, you're at a place that I want to be, or that I aspire to be, and I want to learn from you. So more recently, like last year, for example, this gentleman who I've known for the better part of a decade, I met him at the bars back in the day, and we've stayed in touch since then. He's been in multifamily for 20 plus years. And so last year I called him up and I was like, I had a lot more time on my plate with the market slowing down. And I was like, man, it's kind of, I saw it as like a forced evolution, right? Like, I've been talking about doing something else or getting more in depth in my real estate investing, learning, something bigger and greater. So I called him up and I was like, what are you doing and how can I help? Right. And that was it. And he was like, well, I've got XYZ. Here's what I need help doing. It's raising capital for various projects and deals. If you can do that, like, be the face for the capital raise, like, that'd be fantastic. And I'll train you up along the way so you know the lingo, you know what you're talking about. And I've learned so much. Like, really had to step outside of my comfort zone. Like, I'm not naturally somebody that likes putting myself out there on the internet. Um, Prior to doing all this and taking these steps, like, I had deleted my Facebook off my phone and hadn't even logged into it for like 3+ years. But I also had,
As we sit here
yeah,
broadcasting your origin story.
exactly. Such a juxtaposition. And so that was my own, like, hurdle that I had to get over, was this insecurity of, I don't really have anything to offer. And it was, the again, me being a salesman selling myself on the fact that like, oh, well, being anonymous is a superpower in a day and age where everybody's got a megaphone online, right? And it was really just, again, that rationalization of staying within this like comfort zone and not having to grow outside of that. Which you'll like this. So of any of my key takeaways throughout various stages of my life, one of my favorite is that if I'm presented with options or of direction of which to go in my life, it's usually the one that makes me most uncomfortable that I'll choose.
Wow.
Because that's, and I learned this back from my days in selling bookstore to door. I had a big fear of missing out. Like, it's the summertime, all my friends are going to be partying. I could go to the gym. I didn't want to miss out on all that. And my leader at the time sat me down and told me, like, you're not going to grow and become who you want to be if you stay in this comfort zone, this bubble. You've got to step outside of that in order to grow and develop. So again, that was part of the reason why I decided to put myself out there online, to start recording videos and posting them, was to share what I've learned, and realizing that I don't know everything, and wanting to share what I am currently learning. I can also share things that I have learned that could provide value to a lot of other people.
100%. So let's keep going on this timeline. So you're at Loan Depot, you're crushing it in sales, you do 6 figures your first year. What happens after that?
I got a big head on my shoulders, and thought like, grass would be greener elsewhere. It was at this time too. So I had set like a timeline in my head that I wanted to be on the broker side of loans. I liked the freedom, the independence, the business building, the entrepreneurship that I could pursue over there, but I needed the experience, right? So I had set a timeline of like 5 years in the retail space. And in that time frame, it was like, well, it might be a good idea for me to try to get some management experience. So after I had done 2 years, after coming in, and my superiors over there, my managers knew me as the guy just coming in fresh, versus if I transitioned over to a new role at a different company, they see me where I am now, right? So even if I just make a lateral move, go in as a banker, I felt like I had a better shot of getting into management, which I did, but I quickly learned was not my journey. So I went to Freedom Mortgage, which is a wonderful institution. Many opinions about. Well, I'll save those. I don't want to talk ill of anybody, but a lot of false promises were made in terms of timeline and moving up the ladder. I did really well in my role as a banker there, and then was given the opportunity to move up to like an assistant manager role within like 6 months or so. But taking a look at the compensation, it was not worth the amount of time. Like, it was exponentially more hours and more responsibility for less money that I would make working as a banker. So I decided to double down in that role. I transitioned over to a different bank where it was very much like the potential to make more money was certainly there, and I certainly did. I transitioned away from Freedom Mortgage, and kind of gave up on the management side of things, at least at that point in time, and just said like, hey, I've got a strength as a banker. At this point, I had another like 2.5 years on my timeline. So I was like, I'm just going to double down, go over to another bank where I can make a lot more money, stack my chips in the time frame to give me a runway to be able to branch out into the broker world. and in that, that's exactly what I did. I worked really hard. Again, not not outworking some of the hardest workers there, but within the times that I was there, I was working hard and learning what I could, and then transitioned. This was about 3.5 years ago now. I finished out my 5 years within that time frame. I think I was maybe a little bit shy of that, but I felt like I was at a place where I had got the experience that I set out to get by working in those retail environments. And I was either going to continue down that path, and like I'm one that bucks authority naturally. Like I need to be like, spreading my own wings, so to speak, and taking my business in the directions that I want to take it. So I yeah, it was an easy choice at that point. I was given an opportunity to go work with a family-owned and operated brokerage, great reputation, and decided at that point to transition over. So 3.5 years into my days as a broker, it's been fun. I've learned a lot. I've branched out to a lot of different products, helped a lot of clients out, and at this point in my journey, right around that same time frame, like I decided that I was going to get serious about investing. And so I shortly thereafter purchased my first investment property, and just really tore that Band-Aid off and jumped into the waters. Yeah, and so that's kind of where I am today in that journey, just trying to continue, running my brokerage. I've trained a couple people up, and actually, it's funny, I stepped away from the management side of things within the retail environment, but I found that over here on the broker side, like I've been able to help a couple of guys in order to, step into that same kind of freedom, right? So, I've told all my guys, like I'm not a micromanager. I'm not going to sit here and tell you when to log in, how many leads to take, or, you haven't made any money. Like you'll figure that out pretty darn quick. And if you need that kind of management style, this is not the place for you. But I will be here to help you in any aspect of what you need, right? Do you need help looking at a loan in order to decide which way to take it? Do you need, tech assistance, whatever it may be? Like I'm here to give you all the tools and resources, but I can't be the one in the driver's seat for you.
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, so I want to unpack this a little bit. Let's cap off the lending side, and then I want to jump into the real estate investing side and dig into that piece too. So at this point now, because I really want to highlight all of the experience that you've gained because of the time that you put in and the commitments that you've made. How many loans have you funded in your career? I don't know if you can add a dollar amount to how much you funded, and let's get some key takeaways from that as well.
Man, that's a good question. I would say it's north of 100 million over the 8 years that I've been doing it, which is not a whole lot. Like there's guys that do that in 1 year. There's guys that do near $1 billion in a single year. So it's not. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal with that, and I know it sounds like a lot of money, but I'm not trying to downplay it. But in terms of like the grander scheme of lending, it's not a whole lot over an 8-year time frame. It's probably been close to, if not surpassing, like 1,000 loans, I would say, in total. So yeah, I think that answers that question.
That's incredible. I mean, think of how few people have ever reached $100 million plus of loans funded. That's incredible.
That is, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what the data looks like on that. The past couple of years has been about 25 million a year, which I feel like is a pretty good benchmark for someone in this business. Like if I was really adamant on scaling it and building out a team, then I think at my sites, 25 million would be would not fit. Well, I would need to raise the bar, right, if that were the case. But honestly, like the last 4 years, my focus has been my family, my health first and foremost, my family, and then my business. We've talked about this. Like without health, like you can't support a family. You can't show up at work, right? Health is the greatest wealth. My family, like God, my oldest is going to be 5 in a month. We've got an 8 month, almost 9 month old. Like I can't buy that time back. I could have
Right.
dug my heels in, built out this, done a couple more loans a month or something, reinvested back into the business and just been at my desk constantly. But man, I got tea parties, I got to play outside with my girls. I got to teach them stuff. Really during the most important years, like I a lot of that, I've talked to a lot of people in my lending career, a lot of which, if you're in a position to be an investor and be doing multiple loans, like you're a little bit older in most cases. And I've always picked their brains. And it's funny, so many of them were more envious of my position in life than I would say comparative to my envy of their position, just because of like the money situation. Like, have you ever heard, what would you rather have? Would you rather be old and wealthy or young and broke?
Always young.
Always young, always. So like I've not spent the most time working on my business or on my money because, I honestly find that having a certain amount of money, um, while certainly makes life easier, does not lead to having a better life. Like after a certain point, like I've heard it said where if like as long as you're not worried about the bill when you go out to eat, like you've got at least enough money to pay for that and pay for your basic expenses, like there's more important things out there. Like while we're always trying to push the needle with our finances and whether it be just adding another zero to net worth or a dollar amount per month, something like that. Like I think those goals are necessary in order to just have a target to be moving towards. But I don't hang my confidence on that. Like just
I love that takeaway.
so that's really been my main focus and will be until my both girls are in school full time. At that point, then there's much more of my day where they're away, but those hours beforehand and after and on the weekends, like will be 100% devoted to them, at least until they become old enough to where they hate me. And, then I can really dig into my business.
That's right. You can channel that into the business.
Oh yeah, it's
Um,
coming. There's no question.
That's hilarious. Okay, so I want to transition into the real estate investment side because if I had to guess in the business world, that seems to be what you're the most passionate about.
Oh, 100%.
And so it seems like you've ripped off the band-aid, you've already started investing, but walk us through that first deal. Let's talk about some of the things that you did that you would have done differently and some of the things that you did that you would always advise to do again. Let's dig into it. Let's take out all the golden nuggets from it.
Sure. So I would say what really piqued my interest was Bigger Pockets and all the podcasts. And this is right around the time when I started working at Freedom Mortgage, which would have been, 2017, 2018, somewhere in that time frame. I started taking in a lot of information, and I always gravitated towards like the beginning episodes as opposed to like the newer ones that were coming out. Like I try to keep tabs on the latest stuff if it interests me, but I found a lot of nuggets within those first episodes where they're bringing on like the dinosaurs, the old guys in the room, who God bless the Burr method. Like it's a great method to scale up your business, at least in an appreciating market, in my opinion. But the old guys would be like, what are you talking about? Like you need to be putting 40% down with a 15-year note, and save until you have your next down payment, and so it was just this old school logic that I was like, wow, like you don't hear that a lot, but these guys have been around and are extremely successful, and it's a proven method of success, right? So like I would always try to pick out like those golden nuggets. Um, I think so that was really probably 3 to 4 years was literally just in this information intake, right? And trying to figure out like, do I want to do long-term rents? Do I want to do fix and flips? I'm not really interested in wholesaling. I had figured out like, um, I wanted buy and hold, right? Where I could eventually get off of a hamster wheel, not get out of one job and into another, so to speak. Um, so it took a long time for me to really find the avenue that I was most attracted to. And this is funny. So I had saved up a good amount of money and focused in on. I was like, I'm going to do Airbnb. I want to buy up in this market north of Phoenix, Arizona called Flagstaff. It's a great vacation market. I had known a couple guys that had done it well. It was successful for them. And so I was like, okay, cool. Like I want to piggyback on what they've done, kind of follow in those footsteps. And even then, even after identifying that market, I want to say we looked at houses and that were coming on the market for maybe 3 years before we finally found one that we really liked and decided to pull the trigger on. And a lot of it came down to the numbers for me. I was very much into underwriting and like trying to predict like what this was going to look like moving forward, average case, worst case. One of the honestly the biggest factor that moved the needle and why we decided to do this was around the time my dad died. It was shortly thereafter. And, growing up, he, excuse me, worked his butt off. Man, I remember like driving to work with him and, we'd have 45 minutes, an hour in the van. And he'd be listening to like real estate CDs, like, oh, there's got to be a way I could figure this out. I can do this. Like I'm doing the work for all these other people. And, God bless him. He saved up a good amount of money, took great care of us as kids, him and my mom, but never pulled the trigger. And I saw that and I was like, I don't want that to be my story. Like I'm young
Wow.
enough to make mistakes. Why not? Like it's so we pulled the trigger all right. I mean, it was a sizable investment. It was a massive renovation project that we took on. And growing up, like I had been around construction and been around all that stuff. So I don't have a construction license, a GC license, but I know enough not to get taken advantage of, which is about all that I care to know at this point. There's a lot that goes into it. But no, we pulled the trigger on it. And I think it was a combination of taking the action, all the preparation and study that led up to that point, my previous experience, not to mention my wife. So like I'm good at swinging a hammer when I need to, and like directing a crew as to what knowing, okay, this could go over here, like this floor plan, we could do this. No, we're not taking out that like what do you call it? The structural wall, Joanna Gaines, like that's way too much. We're gonna blow the budget. Yeah, reining my wife in certain areas, but she grew up watching her parents remodel and decorate houses all the time. So like she has this amazing innate skill set that I do not have. So when it came to like the furniture and the setup and color palettes and all that, I'm like, all you take it and run with it. And she did a phenomenal job. So thank God, like we had this great collaborative effort, this teamwork between the two of us, that we were able to really pull that off. And it's been that's been the one of our two investments thus far. But I think that my strategy is in terms of real estate investment is low and slow. I don't need to grab 5,500 doors or however many. And a lot of times when, it's funny, the guys that are touting how many doors that they have, it's like, in your personal name or assets under management? Like what percentage of all those doors do you really own? And not only that, but I've heard of, I don't know these guys personally, but I've heard of guys with hundreds of doors where they maybe cash flow, maybe don't. So it's like, yeah, you've got all those doors, but what's the total cash flow on all that, if it even does? And it's like, so in my mind, there's quality over quantity a lot of times wins out.
And so what was the result of all the renovation? You get into the short term, you did all this research, you took the big bet. How did that first property, that first investment, how did that end up working for you? And what were some more of those takeaways to where you're like, okay, I did this one, now I've learned, now what moving forward?
Oh, great question. It's worked out phenomenally. I love that property. It does extremely well. We found really good property management to where I don't have to be involved in the day to day. So that was a good takeaway. I wanted to start with the end in mind. And I was like, I would love to own multiple properties, but I don't want to get to a point where now I own all these, the numbers are working out, and now I have to bring in property management. I wanted to start like that, so that way I could scale up a lot easier. And still, lending is a pretty demanding job in most cases, so most markets. So like I didn't want to have to be juggling all those balls plus family plus health and all that. So yeah, I mean it did far better than I ever would have imagined. And I think that plays to a few different factors. One was that we wanted to target like the higher end market, which if you go on AirDNA or at these analytic websites, like there's in any given market, there's far less homes that are 4-bed, 5-bedroom than there are 1, 2, 3, right? So you just have a smaller pool to compete with. I think it's more economical for Airbnb owner or for the guests that are staying there. Like when it's a bigger home, well, now you can have more of a family experience than you can if it was in a hotel, right? And the costs can honestly be cheaper in most cases. And plus, you get a family environment, right? Everybody after they get home from their day's excursions can hang out around the fire, can cook meals together. Versus in a hotel, like you got to go out to eat, great, and you could still do that in Airbnb, right? But at the end of the day, everybody's going to their separate rooms, so you don't get a lot of that family experience, those memories. So I think it has distinct advantages there.
And let's talk. I don't want to talk specific numbers, but as far as statistics of like percentage wise, what was the cash on cash return? How did that line up with what you were expecting? Maybe we can talk some of those more. They're still helpful statistics to kind of think through, but obviously, maintains the anonymity of the actual deal, given that we're talking about your actual, experience here.
Sure. I think, well, when I was underwriting it, I was like, based upon, I leaned on property management and my friends and what their experiences were to say like, okay, if I have this property, it's at this capacity, level, what kind of annual revenue can I expect? And based on your experiences, and then like what's absolute worst case. So the numbers worked out. To me, I wanted at least 20% cash on cash or yield on like a good year, an average year. And at worst case, I wanted at least 10%. So it checked both those boxes. And I think in the past 2 years that we've owned and operated it, it's done about 25% cash on cash. So again, just better than we anticipated. And that doesn't take into account the tax benefits that come into play with the ownership and the depreciation. So all in total, within a 2-year time frame, like we've been paid back all of the money that we've paid into it via the cash flows, via the principal pay down, and then the tax benefits.
That's incredible.
It blows my mind. In fact, so this is a nice segue into what I've learned from that. So in the first year, we took the cash flow profits and we bought a second property. And I didn't adhere to my original thought pattern, right? I bought a smaller property that was 3 beds, 2 bathrooms. It had a lot of the renovations already done to it. So we had to come in there and fix a lot of errors that were done, or like things that weren't done properly, in my opinion. But you know, so from that, we kind of deviated from the target market that we want, and I rationalized that by saying like, okay, like now we've got 2 different markets that we can operate in. One is like the higher end, and then this one is more for like our family size when we just want to get up and get away. And I guess, yeah, we could, instead of blocking off our property and taking away revenue from there, we can block off this one and use this as kind of use it as a second home for us when it's not rented. I don't recommend that. Not, that's a takeaway I tell people all the time in lending, is it's, yes, you can look at or try to buy a property as something to use for yourself, whether it's primary residence or secondary residence. And you can also look at that property through the lens of an investment. But oftentimes when you try to get mix and match, right, like 50% of this and 50% of that, you wind up with 100% of neither. And it may not even add up to work out, which is essentially what happened with this one. So we bought it with the first year's profits. We got it up and listed. Number one, we weren't up there nearly as much as we had anticipated being up there. So it didn't check that box for us of like, we could actually use this as a second home and stay there when we wanted to go up there. And like while I still underwrote it conservatively, it had a better year than I anticipated it doing. And because there were a couple unforeseen things that we had to pay for, like it went way over budget, the numbers, it wound up hitting that like bare minimum, like 10%. Wow. Right. So after a year, I said, we'll hold on to it for at least a year. The strategy there was to, one, give it a chance, right, to see how it would do and be able to look at a total year's worth of earnings. The second reason for that was because at the year point, and I'm not a CPA, so don't take this at face value. Talk to your CPAs, people. But it transitions from short-term cap gains within that first year to long-term cap gains, which at the time, I don't know if this has changed, went from like 40% to 20%. So
meaning on the taxes you would have to pay should you sell it.
Correct. So within that first year, 40, anytime after that, 20. I was like, well, we could at least hold it to within that time frame to give it a chance. And then if we do still want to sell it, now we have far less tax burden to pay, right? So ran the numbers after the first year, and again, it performed better. But and I still go back and forth on whether or not I should have sold it, but it was essentially either keep it for X amount of cash flow or sell it and take 10 years of that cash flow all at once. To me, that was far more valuable, and just take the guaranteed profits. We shored up a 20% return on the overall investment, which goes from being on paper to actually a realized gain. So it was like, okay, let's take the win while we have it. The market's still on the decline. So yeah, at that point, it was like, I have a feeling that if we continued to hold it, like that market would come back, and 5-10 years from now could have gotten a much higher sales price. However, I don't know what the bookings would look like from that time. Right, Airbnb has become very saturated in a lot of markets, especially in the lower barrier to entry price points. Your 1-1s, your 2-1s, your 3-2s, right? So yeah, I was just like, well, let's stick to what we know. And at this point, like if we go do Airbnb again on another property, my eyes gravitate towards the higher end properties. Again, just higher barrier to entry, not as many players, not as many properties that are listed, even if they are in that space. A lot of people that can afford those homes, like that's for them. they don't they don't want, to Airbnb it out and at that point. So it just plays into that. So my learning from that was like, I learned like, you can snowball your earnings, right? You can take your earnings from one property, and once you have enough for a down payment on another one, snowball it in. And I sidestepped a lot of the principles that got us to be successful in the first place. And luckily, like, it was a mistake that still paid us to make it. And I think that's, attributed to just the good market that we were in when we bought. And we also bought when the interest rates were low, so it was able to do well. But stepping outside of that and saying, just buying it for the sake of, well, we've got this money, we need to invest it, I would not do that again. I would much rather sit on the cash, wait for a good opportunity that comes up within our buy box, right? The things that we're good at, the things that we know we can execute on, and move on those things at that point.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's brilliant of doing the thing that worked the first time again and again and again, and just rinse and repeat. Because if you make back your principal in 2 years, that is like amazing. I mean, I just want to stress how unbelievable of an investment move that is in the positive way. Like, it is very difficult to get your money back that quickly. I mean, that's extraordinary. So the fact that you could take that and then go on and do another investment, that first property still cash flows. Now you have the second one that cash flows. And yes, you learned a ton. I would bet you the learnings from that quote unquote mistake on that second property, that's probably going to pay you more than what that first property is going to do in the long run. Just the compounded learnings, so on and so forth. You still love the first one because, at the 25%.
It's a unicorn. It's an absolute unicorn. And the tricky part of that is, like, and we have our buy box and we're looking for unicorns. Well, they don't come up very often. So at some point, if we want to continue investing and growing our portfolio and our business, like, we'll need to buy something that isn't a 2-year payback.
Well, maybe because if we look at some of the best investors on the planet, and of course I'm talking about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, if you look at their whole career of decisions and investments that they've made, all of their success, all of it has come from about 15 really, really good decisions.
Oh, that's interesting.
15. So they're in their 90s. Actually, Charlie Munger may have hit 100 by now. I don't know. But they're definitely at least in their 90s. Hundreds of billions of dollars of profits that they've made. And 15 decisions led to that. So they actually practiced what you just talked about, which was taking those profits, taking the cash, sitting there and analyzing, doing the homework, doing the research. And when they find that deal, they find the next unicorn, going at it and not being afraid to take that swing. But like I said, so, you make, of course, you're going to find more unicorns. They may be few and far between, but when you get them, you'll know what they look like because you're looking for them.
Exactly.
But then those other compounded learnings, in addition to the compounded cash flow, there's so much knowledge there. This is why we do an origin story, because now we've seen this whole trajectory of your career up until this point, because this kind of brings us to present. And now people know all the different things that you've done, that you've been through, that you figured out, that you've learned, the mistakes you've made, the wins that you've had. And there's so much goodness there. There's so many nuggets of wisdom there. So that's why I love doing the origin stories here. Okay, so now we're caught up to present. If we missed anything, please fill us in. But we're caught up to present now. So talk to us about what you're the most excited about now. Where's your main focus, and what is that? What's the dream for you right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, what I'm most excited for now is, finding the next unicorn, keeping an eye out for those opportunities, but also I think taking a more active role in finding those opportunities, right? Like the MLS is great, and we've bought traditionally up to this point with all of our investments. I remember, meeting some sub-2 students in the community, and they're asking like, oh, how many houses have you acquired? And I was like, oh, I've bought 4 in my lifetime, and 2 primaries, 2 investments. And I'm like, oh, how'd you find them? I was like, on the MLS. How'd you finance them? I was like, conventionally. Like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, maybe that's just within that community, right? Like it was such a far-fetched idea, but taking action to me is actively doing the things that are talked about in order to reach out to agents, right? Like here's what I'm looking for. If you find a deal like this, if you find a seller like this, bring them to me. I can try to help them out and in a way, and pay them as well to where everybody wins. And trying to manifest that with the efforts of virtual assistants, building a team, and using those skills of management and business building that I've acquired throughout the years to make those opportunities, as opposed to waiting for the inbox to fill up of new listing. Oh, let's underwrite it. New listing, let's underwrite it. It's like at this point, yeah, I like underwriting deals and I have that skill set, but I also know that there's people that are better at it than me who I can pay to do it. And that way I can focus on my strong suits and the things that I'm best at in order to move that needle forward. Right. So that's a big focus for me moving forward, along with the second part of that, learning more about multifamily, building relationships. Because one thing I've learned is that I'm very much, I get excited about something and then I'm full bore into it. Like, let's raise capital for multifamily. Here's a deal. We need capital. Let's go. And raising capital in multifamily, I mean, these are large sums of money, and it takes years to develop those relationships. It takes a long time for that trust to build up to where, like, yes, like this is a good deal. You know what you're talking about, and like my money is safe if I invested in this direction. And I've said throughout my lending career, like I'm very conservative with my own funds and much more so with my clients. Like I don't want to be the guy that told you to make an investment and then it doesn't work out, right? So, there's been opportunities that the clients have brought me and I'm like, I don't think you should do this deal. Like it's not in my best interest to say that. Like I'm losing a loan, I'm losing revenue, right, in doing that. But at the same time, like if I save that person from making a big mistake, like they're going to remember that and they'll bring the next deal to me, or they'll take that knowledge and make a better decision. And to me, that's far more valuable, right? So in a sense, my journey into multifamily and building these relationships is on the same level as what I've always been trying to do within lending, is building that trust, building those relationships, and it's just at a different plane.
That's fantastic. So raising capital for multifamily, name of the game, looking for the unicorns in the meantime, being more proactive, building your team and going out and looking for deals and building up your buy and hold portfolio and spending time with your family and learning a lot and staying fit. Seems
100%.
like your goals right now.
1,000%. That's health, family, money. Those are the 3 main focuses. Yeah, I would say that sums me up in a nutshell, man.
I love it. So as we kind of reach the end of end of this origin story, I want to just open up the floor to you, which is funny to say because this is your channel and this is your story. But I really just want to put it out there and open up that floor so that anything that we didn't cover about you, about your story, about your beliefs, the things you hold to be true, things that are most important to you, what did we not touch on that we need to touch touch on to really have a complete picture of who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in?
And I think we covered most of the one thing I would throw in there is that right around the time I started working with the gyms and realizing that like, hey, I'm in a bad cycle as far as my money goes, and I'm in debt. So that was what really teed off my journey into finance. And while like college didn't really hold my attention, chemistry, I dropped chemistry. I was like, this is not my journey. Like I don't need this to be successful in my life. I knew that. You give me a book on stocks and I will be asleep within 2 paragraphs. But give me a book on finance and personal finance or real estate, and like my bookshelves are filled, right? And I've probably got another 20 books that I've yet to read on those topics. I can't get enough of it, and that's what really kickstarted it. So I came down and I've started with like a Dave Ramsey approach. Like it was recommended to me. I'm like, I'm trying to get out of debt. Like, what should I do? Financial peace comes up. So I applied those principles, and I think within a 6-month period, I wasn't making a whole bunch of money, but I went from maybe 10 to 15,000 in debt to having that paid off within so it was a pretty short turnaround once I got that structure. And I've really, that was how I was able to save up enough money to be able to do that first property. That was years of putting money away, saving it for that first property, and that was the goal and the drive. But it was a long time coming. I mean, even before I was at Loan Depot, made the 6 figures my first year. I was even when I was training, I was setting aside money in a Roth IRA every single year and trying to max that out so that I could have, I could be saving money and moving in that direction. And I think that's one of my key takeaways in life has been, it doesn't really matter what you're making. It matters what you're saving, right? Like I've known guys that make millions a year and spend millions more. Like it doesn't, just because you hit that goal line of making money doesn't mean that you're actually using it wisely, right? On the same token, like we could have very easily, well, we have increased lifestyle creep a little bit since when we first started, right? But married, two girls, like it happens. There's only so much you can mitigate along the way. So to that end, I think that's probably one of my biggest superpowers has been, living below my means, making sure that, I'm saving for a rainy day, which, if you're in, I don't care what aspect of sales you're in, but especially in loans, like anybody that had been in the game for long enough and didn't have just complete blinders on knew that this like dry season with loans was coming. And most people didn't stock their acorns away for the winter. A lot of us did, and it shows. So all that to say, that was a key moment in my life, was that realization that like, hey, I'm like broke, I'm in debt, I never want to be here again. And that was honestly like there were a couple times in between, then and now where we were at like a negative net worth, like bad position. And it was always in the instances where, hey, I deserve to have this. Like I've worked my butt off. I like can take this big vacation, or I can buy this house and spend this money. And then I look back and I'm like, man, like we're at a deficit again. Right. And so I think that it's taken a lot of personal humility to try to take myself out of that mindset, and not always be so humble, but be humble enough to where you're not overextending yourself beyond your means.
That's brilliant. My friend, this has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to go along this journey with you and to learn about your origin story. And thank you very much for trusting me to be the interviewer that gets to ask some of these questions. So this has been amazing. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for letting me be a part of this.
Dude, thank you so much, Ben. You were so good at this, like completely blew my mind. When you first proposed this, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I love an origin story. And then learning that you've done this hundreds of times, I was like, oh man, like buckle up. This is going to be something different. And you certainly delivered, man. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You're the man. I appreciate you. And I just want to give a shout out to the audience. Y'all, there are very few people in this world who you'll meet and you're like, wow, this is somebody special. I know that every one of you who's made it this far knows that the gentleman that we're all learning from today, you, Alex, somebody special. And so I would say make sure to turn on those notification bells, subscribe, give him all the love, but more importantly, learn from his journey. And I would highly suggest reaching out because I know that the rewards of our friendship have been amazing thus far, and we're just getting started on that journey. So thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being you, and to everybody watching and listening, I would highly, highly encourage you to all stick around, stick with Alex. There are very few people, like I said, who have that level of integrity. We're going to make sure to give it to you straight and really tell you the truth and break it down and share. And Alex is one of those people. So hold on to those people when you find them because they're few and far between.
Likewise, Ben. I think of you in the same light. I appreciate all your time and looking forward to the future and seeing where our friendship takes us, man.
Right on. You're the man.
All right, brother. Take care.